Well, that was an episode. Diamond Dust makes their appearance as characters, significant background is filled in, Nina and Momoka make up for having no fights last episode by having two major confrontations this time, the rhythm section continues to help keep the band in sync, we get something at least adjacent to a confession, and somehow, there isn't a single protest or even comment about the new band name Nina plucked from the air. I've got my work cut out for me this week, so forgive me for focusing on a few specific things. The threat hanging over the band's unity last episode came from the two decisions we discussed at length. Momoka quitting the band, and Nina quitting cram school. And Nina's decision was easier to understand, as the episode spent a lot more time on her mindset. This time, we do the same thing for Momoka, by filling in a lot more about Diamond Dust, so we'll begin there, and afterwards, we'll look at her two fights with Nina. The combination of these threads leads to Momoka changing her mind and everyone's direction. The expanded information around her old group comes from three places. The pre-credits flashback, Momoka's explanation to Nina outside a DD performance that is intermixed with more flashbacks, and the actual first encounter between old and new bandmates at the end. For starters, it seems like Momoka was a lot of the driving force in Diamond Dust, the one setting goals and optimistically planning moves towards their future. She is trying to convince them to drop out of school, discouraging any kind of half measures or escape routes, and all while writing out a pie-in-the-sky goal that is all too familiar: to make it to the Budokan. She has a black and white do-or-die outlook on this whole rock band theme, even seems to have a sense of urgency, as though waiting just to graduate might put the entire dream beyond reach. No doubt, this memory is on her mind because of Nina's announcement, as Nina is also surrendering her escape route to throw everything into her musical aspiration. Presumably, Momoka's fervor and persuasion won out in the past. The others also abandoned any backup plans to follow her lead, and now in the present, she is the one who bailed out. She demanded they give up any other future, and now does not even walk alongside them in the one she chose. This is an important clarification. Momoka was the one who quit, so we might have imagined that she was the most reluctant member, that she went along with dropping out only to keep the band together. To learn she was the instigator, and maybe some of the others dropped out only at her urging, is a completely different picture. A part of why Nina feels so hurt right now is that Momoka asked a lot of her, pushed her to become the kind of singer she is, and so the announcement of quitting feels like a gut punch, a betrayal. I wouldn't fault any of the Diamond Dust members for feeling similarly put out, if not more so, considering they spent years more going down the path of no return than Nina has. Momoka must surely know this. The regret we can tell hangs off of her, I now assume is also shot through with guilt. Diamond Dust continues to play, and continues to accept the changes asked of them for the sake of success, and whether or not they like it, she was part of why they are in this position without any fallback plan. So, of course, she doesn't hold a grudge against them. If anything, we should expect them to hold a grudge against her. And of course, it would be in poor taste for her to criticize the way they've changed, the things they've chosen to survive. She bears responsibility for putting them into that position. Whether or not she thinks she made the right choice, she actively tried to eliminate their overall choices. And no wonder she wants to avoid them, wants to avoid even the topic of them. But what she also wants to avoid is repeating history. The second and especially crucial encounter is when she takes Nina to show her a Diamond Dust performance, and I rather like the symbolism of them viewing it from behind. Nina had only ever been an audience member to the band, both literally and figuratively viewing them from the front. But Momoka sees them from a backstage perspective, and it's that perspective she shares. For me, this helps clarify something I talked about last time, Momoka's odd statement that her songs wouldn't work at a professional level. I thought maybe something so specific meant that she'd been told so directly, or was being sidelined as a songwriter. But it turns out to be a gap in our understanding. Nina's surprise at the audience makeup for the Diamond Dust concert she attended, and the surprise at the whole idol band makeover, that led me to believe that the shift was rather sudden, that they were a rock band that got signed, were then asked to make all these aesthetic and musical changes, and Momoka bailed rather than make the switch. Evidently, that is not what happened. It was instead a gradual change, turning up the heat on what Momoka could tolerate. So, when Momoka explains how they were against being an idol band, that they'd only play their music, we are to understand that their mindset back then was the same as Nina's is now. But, as Momoka explains, even if they were praised, they didn't sell tickets. She relates that over a memory of them seeing more idol-like outfits prepared for them to perform in. And Momoka is the fiercest in opposition, but one of her bandmates will stop her from grabbing the outfits and doing something to them. She says only the most laughable acts would become hits. The things you might scoff at are what become popular. And then we see that they did all accept the costume change. There's no sense of how long this goes on or how many times Momoka performs, but the way she says that truth slowly begins to pressure you makes me think it was something more gradual. She sees that they will increasingly have to do the things that will sell tickets. That's actually the first part of what she says to Nina when showing her diamond dust on stage in front of a large audience. That this is what it means to not set escape routes and survive. They can't afford to just play the songs they like. To survive, they must chase what will sell, what will be liked, what will go viral. Choose to reject that, and you can't continue. This, then, is where her comment about songwriting must come from. They don't work at a professional level means that they are not enough by themselves to work at a professional level. They weren't selling tickets only on the strength of their musical merits, but needed the added boost of an idol-like makeover. Needing to become one of those laughable acts suggested to Momoka that she wasn't a good enough writer to survive without such tactics. Presumably, she thinks the same thing will happen again, and the same choice will be presented. She'll tell Nina she doesn't want her to make the same choice she did, but we're going to come back to that. To complete our picture of Diamond Dust, then, we need to hear from them, brief as it may be. When they happen upon Momoka in the midst of her second fight, they'll recognize her and call out, which causes Momoka to flee. In fact, she's so desperate not to run into them that she'll leave Nina behind when she hesitates. Luckily, Nina has no shortage of reckless impulses and will halt Momoka's escape, allowing Diamond Dust to catch up. But when they try to approach, Momoka will lay on the horn, telling them to back off. And I gotta say, this was such a cool way to stage this reunion. The dramatic near accident hanging frozen in the truck's position, the atypical setting to have this shouted conversation, Diamond Dust in their stage outfits still. If someone dropped you onto the scene without any context, you'd still pick up the sense of a dramatic and unexpected confrontation. And Momoka really doesn't want to confront or be confronted, hence laying on the horn, but her old bandmates seem to understand this, since the first to call out says that she doesn't have to say anything, just listen. And then a different one says they heard she started a band, while the final original member says that they look forward to it. Having these lines shared among her former bandmates tell us that they are on the same page about what they're saying. It's not a single person's opinion. Now, those lines alone tell us that they are not harboring a grudge towards her, that they aren't chasing after her because they want to fight. They even still call her Momokan, like in the opening flashback, and with a familiarity that implies remaining unchanged in their eyes. Learning that Momoka did not actually give up music hasn't made them bitter, but the opposite. They're glad to learn she is trying again, and they look forward to seeing what the new band is like. The next part, though, seems like the real kindness when we imagine Momoka's state of mind. The way she ruminated on the flashback, where she urged the rest to drop school and every other contingency, seemed like something that could leave her racked with guilt, that they were stuck on this path because of her, and she doesn't have the decency to suffer alongside. Likewise, during her explanation to Nina, she'll imagine the other members reading all the fan outrage over their changes, over Momoka leaving the band, over what they've become, and she pictures them dejected at the response to their choices. Thus, the kindness. They shout out that they don't regret anything, that they're going to make it to the top, that they weren't wrong. They are not suffering and trapped and regretful. Instead, they are determined to reach towards greater heights. They've accepted what they've done to get there and will keep going. To make it a point to tell her that they are still aiming at the top and that they have no regrets is effectively absolving Momoka of blame. She has nothing to feel guilty about. Now, several things culminate in the next part of that encounter, so we are going to circle back to that. The important lesson so far is that Momoka's idea of what she is to Diamond Dust has turned out to be in error. The imagined crisis of a collision was one that only existed in her head. She was running from this encounter because she thought she knew how it would go, and I would wager that this wasn't what she imagined. Likewise, Momoka is running from Nina's push to go pro because of the outcome she envisions. But the problem may not be in the external realities they can't control, the inherent way of the world, this may also be a crisis that only exists in Momoka's head. As said, there are two big confrontations, and Momoka has two different understandings for each of them. The first one, inside the rest stop, is when Momoka believes Nina is acting unilaterally and recklessly over some naive pipe dream, a girl whose priorities are all awry. She starts by demanding she apologize for using the stage to air her personal things, that she violated a space that's meant for the audience, and Subaru, at least, agrees with this. That kind of ignorance or unprofessionalism aligns in Momoka's head with her picture of Nina as someone getting way ahead of themselves, as someone with so little understanding of the music biz that she would, well, attempt to go pro right away and seek to challenge a band like Diamond Dust, all while trying to drag the rest of them along with her impulses. Worse still, though, Nina is antagonizing her directly, blaming the sudden announcement of leaving the band for why she used the stage to tell them about quitting cram school. She'll grill her about why she didn't move home, why she started a band if she's so certain of the outcome. And when Momoka refuses to answer, telling her to go back to cram school, Nina accuses her of running away. The temerity of this, and perhaps the truth of it, nearly drives Momoka to violence. It does not quite rise to that, but that escalation is a clue for us to how sharply Nina's words affect Momoka, that she has touched a sensitive, perhaps wounded part of her. Violence in this case isn't so much about Momoka being the kind of girl that would punch out a bandmate as it is about Nina having struck a nerve. Let's remember that for the later encounter. Ultimately, Nina herself diffuses the situation by invoking her own wounded past, telling Momoka if she strikes her, she'll be able to hate her, that she would be just the same as them. In this case, I assume she means the people who bullied her in the past, and I'm tempted to think that this is how Momoka takes it as well. She doesn't want to be one of those, and disengages. The difference between this and the later fight is down to a shift in perspective facilitated by a third party, so let's take a brief detour to praise our rhythm section yet again. Rupa plays the role of the Tomo Whisperer throughout the episode, preventing her from running away during this fight at the rest area, countering Tomo's statement that it's over again with her own belief that it's the beginning, and generally attempting to counter Tomo's pessimism with optimism. It seems clear that some kind of infighting wrecked their previous band, explaining Tomo's aversion and worry, but Rupa has a sharper insight on what is going on between Momoka and Nina. I'm rather tickled that she'll say directly that the opposite of like is indifference, as it's something I feel like I say all the time, and is relevant for these last two episodes. Last time I pointed out that the girls fighting over the band's name was evidence of their investment in it, how much they cared about it, and conversely, the lack of an actual confrontation between Nina and Momoka was evidence of how checked out Momoka had become. This, I believe, is what Rupa means when she tells Tomo that they should welcome infighting. It is not always evidence of a fatal flaw, so much as a problem in the midst of being fixed. Subaru, though, is the real VIP. When Momoka gets dropped off at her home, Subaru will get off as well, saying that the trains are still running and she knows it's a pain to go to the area she lives. In reality, I'm quite sure Rupa knows that the trains aren't running, but they are on the same wavelength here. There's obviously something she wants to discuss with Momoka. And two, one less passenger means they can both spare Tomo a longer car ride in her motion sick state, but they don't have to make her feel like they put themselves out on her behalf. It's hard work keeping this motley crew in sync, but they seem to be equal to it. Subaru comes right out with admitting she wants to chat, and we get a kind of visual echo of Nina and Momoka's meetup after Subaru quickly exited practice and ignored their text back in episode 4. After some light small talk, Subaru lays it on her. Nina is not, in fact, acting unilaterally and recklessly on some misguided impression of the heights their band can reach, talking about going pro before they even have their indie band debut, as Momoka says. Instead, they are ahead of the game. They've been accepted to the festival, are in fact one of the most anticipated acts. An agency has already reached out to Rupa. A singer praised Nina's voice in a way that went viral, and the addition of their mystery duo with the strong online following has culminated in this. Toganashi Togiari has quickly amassed a following of over 27,000 despite their very short tenure. Now do the earlier numbers on following size come back into relevance. I don't think Diamond Dust remains at 20,000. I imagine they are far higher than our fivesome at this point, as it's implied they had rapidly gained 10,000 in the wake of their label debut. That's not the comparison to make. Rather, it's the one between them and what the venue owner said about the indie band version of Diamond Dust. They reached a height of 10,000, which was enough to get on the radar of agencies. Even without the indie band debut that Momoka expects as a first step, they have blown way past what her old band managed in their 3 or so years fighting to make a name for themselves. Momoka just wasn't paying attention, wasn't even thinking about such a future, and this is all a rather shocking reveal. But it's only half of it. Nina isn't acting only on her own whims, trying to force the band into her grudge match with Diamond Dust. Rupa and Tomo always wanted to go pro, and joined them in that pursuit. And Subaru just likes doing what she does. Momoka had a picture of Nina as this headstrong girl out of sync with the rest, but it is Momoka herself who has become the one offbeat. The rest are united in this pursuit, and she is not only the one holding out, but the one with the least understanding of the band's position and success. That should be sobering for the girl who is supposed to be the experienced industry veteran. It does not change Momoka's mind, but stokes a different worry. Not about the band or its direction, but about Nina. Subaru shares that Nina is always saying that they need to set a goal and corner themselves, and that reminds Momoka of herself in the past. And so, this shift in her understanding, to learn that they really are close to the starting line of a pro band, is the motivation that she takes into the second confrontation. Now, part of it we've discussed already, the backstage perspective on Diamond Dust and the difficult choices they made in order to survive. This wasn't something she shared when they were just a hobby band, but if they're this close, then I guess she feels the warning must be delivered sooner rather than later. After building the picture of the choice they faced, she tells Nina the critical thing. She doesn't want her to make the same choice she did. She answers the earlier question about wanting to start a band and make music again, that it was because of Nina's singing, something she did out of love rather than wanting money or recognition. That also echoes something Mine said about Nina's singing and the reason for the gifted guitar, that her voice wasn't unpleasantly seeking attention. And now comes something that we've referenced several times in our discussion, that there are a lot of aspects of Nina that make her seem like a version of Momoka shifted in time. Even Mine's compliment to Nina drew a parallel to her. There are literal echoes, like dropping out at 17 to come to the city, or the impact of Mine earlier in their paths. But for Momoka, the real parallel is what she said at the end of episode 2, when ultimately convincing Nina to join her, that Nina is just like the songs she'd forgotten about, the ones she loves and wants to keep holding on to. Then, as now, she cradles Nina's face with her hands, an expression of the tenderness she feels. But this isn't directed entirely at Nina. Momoka is, in part, speaking to her younger self. The girl who moved to Tokyo with her head full of dreams and a heart full of a love for music has instead become the Momoka of the present, cynical over the compromises demanded of her, insecure over the inability to succeed on her own terms, and guilty over quitting Diamond Dust and imagining the others suffering without her. If Togonashi Togiari goes pro, she imagines Nina facing the same path and the same heartache. Since she can't undo her own disillusionment, she can at least forestall Nina's own, preserving her idealistic love of the stage a little longer. She says, "You were the version of myself I loved, someone I used to be." For Momoka, this is one part charity and one part self-flagellation, and it is completely, entirely misguided. Nina is not Momoka at 17, but Nina at 17. And this Nina has sacrificed much and fought her own tendencies to become someone who chooses her own path. Whether by threat of violence or words of kindness, an attempt to corral Nina into her own expectations is, to Nina, nothing but hostility. "What about her feelings?" she asks, and then shouts, and when Momoka grabs her to stop her running away, Nina slaps her. Like the incident at the rest stop, I think the violence is more about the sharpness of the emotion the offender is feeling. Momoka has touched a wound. She says she's not her memory, "Don't lock me inside your memory," and then we cut to a memory. The resolution of the school's attempt to sweep the bullying under the rug and force a handshake between Nina and her tormentor. From their two expressions, you can tell this is not a truce. It's a victory for the bully and defeat for Nina. Or at least it would be if she accepts it. She's mouthing the words to Momoka's song throughout, before raising her voice, refusing the handshake to run out, and evidently does the stunt taking over the broadcast room. What does this sequence of scenes have to do with one another, then? Partially, I think Nina is equating Momoka's intent with that of the people in her past, who most wanted a peace that was the absence of conflict or scandal. No one in that room cares about how Nina feels more than they care about creating a face-saving resolution. They are more than willing for her to go unheard if it saves them the trouble she could cause by insisting that the school allowed her to suffer prolonged bullying. And so the broadcast. She does not go unheard. She does not meekly accept others invalidating her feelings for their own peace of mind, and the song she plays is the very one that gave her the motivation to do so. To have Momoka, the writer of that song, now attempt to do something similar to her is rather hard to bear. Momoka is trying to spare her own feelings, saving herself from watching Nina go through what she did, rather than considering what Nina wants, or especially how Nina would feel to be the reason Momoka gives for walking away. And there's more when we return from the flashback. It's possible I'm reading too much into this, but Nina's words, tears, and tone when she says, "There are people who decided to live because of your songs," makes me think that Nina had become suicidal during her bullying, with the lack of support from the school or in her home. Momoka's song isn't just something she likes. It's something that saved her, and that salvation only exists because of everything Momoka put into making the song and Diamond Dust a reality. Nina tells her the thing she needs to protect isn't that memory of herself, the person she used to be. What she needs to protect was what that person desired, to make songs that reach people, to express all her joy and anger and sadness, the whole reason she started a band and came to Tokyo. You see, playing in a band with her school friends wasn't the actual root thing driving Momoka, or else she wouldn't have started again. Instead, Diamond Dust was the way that drive manifested, the means by which her songs might reach others, and Nina is living proof that she succeeded, is in fact only there at all because she succeeded. Momoka has misunderstood. Nina isn't trying to take their band pro and compete with Diamond Dust because she wants to be in a successful band, or out of resentment towards the way they've changed, or even to beat her ex-friend. Those are just the ways her drive has manifested. Her driving goal is to prove Momoka's songs are good enough, that they can reach people as they reached her, and she is willing to bet everything on her. Little wonder Nina is so angry and sad and desperate that Momoka might be giving it all up because she's scared of what might happen, and she pleads with Momoka not to use her to run away. But Diamond Dust interrupting their fight is reason enough to run away, apparently, and so this catches us back up with where I left off, with her old bandmates shouting out their message of looking forward to her new band, and their own resolve to keep climbing toward the top. I love the blocking in this scene, with her old bandmates roughly in a line to signal their unity, while Hina, the stranger to Momoka, hangs back. Momoka is faced away from them, but also in the driver's seat of a running vehicle, able to exit the conversation entirely at the slightest provocation. But Nina stands on the same plane as Momoka, signaling their unity while facing back at Diamond Dust, not running, but meeting their challenge face on, and in fact, adding back some of her own. Well, this strange girl interceding in their reunion is unexpected and kind of presumptuous, bordering on rude, so one will ask her, who does she think she is? But during that, the camera doesn't frame the speaker, it frames Hina, hanging at the back, and she is smiling, though with her head down as though she is hiding it. We will come back to that. Momoka then finally speaks up. I want to point out that she didn't speak up when Diamond Dust shouted at her, but did so after their provocation of Nina, who answered in her place. And while Momoka sounds like she's trashing them for their crappy performance and not being cute enough as an idol band, the smiles on her former bandmates' faces say that this isn't real venom or criticism. It's something they expect from her. It's something familiar and maybe a bit missed. Well, it's her talking to them at all, at least. I'd wager they've tried to reach out before and have been stonewalled. And then Momoka tells them that they're entering the next festival. If they play like crap there, she's going to steal all their fans, and Nina delivers her own declaration of war. But this really isn't about establishing these two bands as rivals. It's about how the two threads we've discussed culminate in Momoka staying in the band, her challenge the confirmation. She had the wrong idea about both her former and current bandmates, and now corrected, can hardly do otherwise. Even if she sort of curses herself as they drive away, after realizing she just committed to reversing her decision. Now, this reunion didn't go the way Momoka expected, and we have forestalled a Nina-Hina reunion to a later point to let this one take the stage. But perhaps that, too, won't go the way that Nina expects if Hina's hidden smile is anything to go by. When questioned, she'll say she doesn't know the girl, but perhaps she means she doesn't know this version of her, the one who stands her ground and shouts challenges back at strangers. That is the part she's smiling at, after all. No need to speculate too much on it, nor do I want to speculate too much about the very last scene. Though Momoka is perturbed at realizing she's back in the saddle, Nina laughs in relief as they drive away. She has come to a decision and confesses to Momoka that she really does love her. In discussion with more knowledgeable people than myself, I've learned that the wording she uses is not restricted to meaning a romantic reveal, but can be used that way. Similar to our word confession, which can also be used for revealing a crime, it's the unveiling of something hidden. So I don't want to ponder or debate if this is romantic in nature, as the next episode will probably quickly clear that up. Instead, it's Nina's sense of relief and their mutual emotional response that gets my attention. The confession and her relieved state while giving it is something Nina does in response to Momoka deciding to continue forward. Nina admired and adored her from afar, her savior and inspiration, and those feelings have grown in the time they've spent together. But as Momoka retracted and thinks of giving it all up, Nina's feelings become a source of pain instead. When Momoka further models behavior that so harmed Nina in the past, her affections towards Momoka become bittersweet indeed. I think this whole episode, and part of the last one, show a Nina thinking about quitting Momoka, if you will, hence her comment in the rest stop about being able to hate her if she really does swing at her. In fact, all of Nina's emotional outbursts in these last two episodes make more sense to me when imagining her as someone thinking she might need to end a relationship for her own good, but desperately preferring that it work itself out instead. Nina has been holding her breath, basically, and that spark of the old defiant Momoka rising to the challenge is enough for her to exhale. This version of Momoka she can allow herself to love, to whatever extent she means that love. To hear that so plainly, and perhaps the subtext that it was in question, crescendos all the roiling emotions in Momoka to a point she can't contain, and so it's her turn to pour out all her joy and anger and sadness. Unstoppering Momoka's bottled-up feelings is, I think, a proof of victory for Nina, who has a little cry herself. And we end with the rest of the band getting their own relief through texts that the meeting went well. We still have a band, and you know what a band really needs? Goals! I skipped this in the encounter with Diamond Dust, but the last thing they shouted at her was that they won't forget. And as Momoka flashes back to the Budokan goal she wrote out in chalk, that is probably what was meant. Presuming that Momoka is reconciled, this should mean that all 9 people in these two bands are aiming for the Budokan. The significance of playing there will differ a bit between them, but doing so serves as proof of whatever it is each has set out to prove. I feel like that has its own pitfalls, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Nina has somehow wrangled her goal of beating a Diamond Dust into an actual competition at the same time, and I'm curious if that will change anything about how Toganashi Togiyari goes about things. They are playing from behind, after all, and now that this fact is no longer a reason to not bother, there are realities they'll have to address about the gulf between them in recognition, resources, and support. But sharing a goal will make all the difference, I imagine. In conflicts, we had a potential one diffuse with hardly a whimper. Nina dropping out of cram school means leaving home for good and losing the support that affords her stay in town, which I thought had potential to threaten her stay in the band. Instead, the beef bowl place apparently can handle another employee, and Nina at least isn't immediately out on the street. And let me tell you, no matter what else we learn about Nina's father, I can't imagine a more scathing indictment than the emotionless and perfunctory note she sends home alongside his bank book. This entire chapter of Cram School appears to only have been about Nina's evolution in choosing direction, something to run toward rather than from, and at this point, her letter is basically a formality rather than some weighty, agonized decision. Overcoming the conflict of Momoka quitting is instead given all the gravitas and attention, and a possible disruption from a run-in with Diamond Dust now seems something that we can put to bed as well. It actually had the opposite effect of providing motivation. Things are kind of looking up around here, no? In characterization, I just want to add a little bit more about Tomo, whose role in the episode was largely to personify the tension of Momoka and Nina's spat and the threat that it posed to the group. She will again largely bend to Rupa's advice when she stops her from leaving the rest area fight, but she still takes a grim outlook on it. Whatever happened before must have looked similar enough to the Momoka and Nina infighting that Tomo concludes that they are likewise about to implode before they've hardly started, and it seems to make her rather gun-shy. This girl seized her future with her own hands at a young age, and continues to keep the Budokan poster above her desk, so it's not like she's just naturally pessimistic. There is instead some sort of sensitive place in her that their conflict seems to touch. Maybe we'll learn more, but right now, it doesn't seem like it will affect her behavior at least. World building was a lot of what happened today, updating both our past and present understanding of Diamond Dust, and filling in more of Nina's bullying saga. The realities of the live music scene continue to churn off stage, and Subaru's interlude with Momoka clues us in on these developments, most notably the reasons for their meteoric rise. We also had a curious little doubling in Mine's gift to Nina of the guitar, and the later reveal that Hina has begun playing guitar for their shows as well, despite being a vocalist only in the concert that Nina attended. Perhaps nothing comes of Nina experimenting with the instrument. It might only have been a kind of defiance against Momoka, who basically forbade her from picking up an instrument in the afterglow of their first performance. I wonder, though, if part of Nina thought about learning as a contingency in case Momoka really did quit. I might expect she would put it aside now, if that is the case, but would she be interested again now that she's seen Hina play? I feel like the guitar's presence or absence in future episodes tells us something either way. Finally, in theme, we got a real exclamation point on that ongoing exploration of a song's meaning or impact, of what one takes out of it or puts into it. Nina deciding to live on over Momoka's work is about as dramatic an example as you can ask for, and her emotional plea to Momoka to continue pouring herself into more songs still is the accompanying counternote. I doubt Momoka wrote it believing she'd rescue some teenage girl from despair and death, but now faced with that reality, how does her own impression of her songwriting change? How much more important might it seem? How much more worth the effort? Nina has hammered on about how much the song meant to her all along, building to this explanatory reveal at perhaps the moment it would impact Momoka the most. It reframes Momoka's hang-up over her songwriting, the faith she lost over believing it wasn't enough on its own. Nina presents her a different metric for success, not in the tickets she manages to sell, but in the listeners she manages to reach. Related to that is a thematic pattern that is particularly pronounced in this episode, but is woven into a lot of the work so far. To simplify it, I want to equate two ideas: the act of saving face and the concept of popularity. Both are related to the opinion of society. Saving face means avoiding social scorn, and popularity means enjoying social approval. Lots of human behaviors are steered by the perception of what a society allows or forbids. These are known as social mores. They are a part of the status quo of any group of people. I want to propose that we have a through line of rock and roll as serving as something that is not necessarily in opposition to these mores, but as a counternote, an alternative, at times an antidote. The spirit of rock presented in the premiere was overwhelmingly one about defiance, pushing back against the inertia of the past, or a return to an approved status quo. Nina's journey from cram school attendee to singer is all about an action she took to save face that she abandons for rock and roll. When Momoka is trying to urge Nina to join them on stage in her ridiculous outfit, she describes all of these qualities of hers that, as Nina points out, are not compliments. They are not things society approves of her feeling, but those very things she feels and how they war within her is rock and roll. To express them on stage is to throw that disapproval back in society's face. So too did Momoka think of Mine's solitary performance as rock and roll, fighting with her song on stage despite being only a footnote of an appearance, despite not being the popular act. Subaru plays drums as a kind of rebellion against the expectations placed upon her, something disreputable compared to a family legacy of acting. Tomo is caustically dismissive of the agencies they'd spoken to, who just latch on to what sells right now. And Nina, of course, chose not to accept the face-saving compromise of making nice with her bully, not only inspired by a rock song, but using it to proclaim her rejection. In this episode, we see an example of bullying against Rupa, whose name and darker skin suggest an ethnic origin outside of Japan. In her role as customer service, she must act to save face, but she tells Nina that this is why she needs rock and roll too. The segment of Japanese society that holds her ethnicity against her is large, but we can see in the long selfie line she generates that this is no liability in the world of rock. It may even be an asset. In the light of all those examples, changing one's band for the sake of mainstream popularity is, well, not very rock and roll, is it? A small wonder Momoka's gut instinct was to run away from what was asked of Diamond Dust, to chase what will sell, what will be liked, what will go viral. The things Momoka said are necessary to survive seem instead to be in opposition to the spirit of rock as the series has described it. To be sure, popularity in the world of rock is being treated differently than popularity in the sense of a wider society. However we are measuring success here requires a number of people who approve. But I feel a distinction is being made between doing things that become popular and doing things because they are popular. The difference isn't in the outcome, but in the intent. Togonashi Togiyari singing whatever they want and skyrocketing to 27,000 followers is treated as a sign of victory because their decisions to this point had nothing to do with courting public appeal. At the same time, Diamond Dust's larger popularity is viewed differently by some because they did choose behaviors aimed at earning that larger following. Now that these two bands are really set up to be in contention, I feel like this ideological tension will remain prominent. That's all for this week. Let me remind you again that whether or not there is a Casual Monday next week, there won't be a Girls Band Cry segment, so we'll pick up episode 9 2 weeks hence. Bye everyone.